I don't know.
With that, we will start our meeting January 29th, 2025. It's 5:34.
All right, not trying to interrupt, you don't normally record work sessions, but I don't know if you intend on recording your work session or what you're doing.
We were just to try to capture some of the discussion. That's okay.
So tonight is a special meeting of the planning commission here specifically for a work session around the regulation of healing centers, aka natural medicine businesses. We'll start with a call to order, go around the table and tell us who you are and what district you belong to. And then I'll probably hand it over to Sean to kind of facilitate the rest of the meeting. After that. So I guess we'll start with Cindy.
Of course. Cindy Watson, District 1 Delta.
Everett Hill, Delta County Code Compliance.
Brittany, planner.
Jacob Perry, District 3. Todd Queen, District 1. John Barrett, Delta County Attorney.
Tony Moss, North Fork. David Merrick, District 3, North Fork.
William Brown's District 2, Cedar Ridge.
Sean Gardner, Delta County Planning.
And I'm Kate Darlington, District 3. So yes, this is just a work session. It's not a public hearing, so we won't be taking any action tonight. I'm getting the conversation started. My understanding is that due to changes in state law, the county needs to create some regulation about how natural medicine businesses will be, how and where they'll be licensed here. So with that, I'll hand it over to Sean. Maybe if you want to give us a quick outline of where you're hoping to talk and lead this conversation. And then I assume we'll have some kind of discussion back and forth.
Yep. Well, thanks everybody for making the effort to be here tonight for this work session. We're going to be discussing amendments that we'd like to make to the land use code for governing the location and the use specific standards for natural medicine businesses. The ability for natural medicine businesses to apply for licensing to the state began on January 1st this year. The location, hours, and manner of operation will be determined by local jurisdictions, regulations in place at the time of their application. So the county commissioners have requested that we make amendments to the 2024 land use code for natural medicine businesses as quickly as possible. So this meeting is a work session. We're gonna go through a little bit of the legislation and the regulation that's been set by the state. That's why we've got the attorney here, John Bear, to kind of walk us through that. Try to keep that around 15 minutes or so, just to kind of introduce what the parameters are that we're working within. And then we've proposed some land use code amendments, and I've given you a copy of the proposed amendments just as a starting point for discussion. And we can go through that for about 15 minutes, just how we've laid it out, and then leave the rest of the time open to kind of discuss that proposed amendment. I also have handed out, I think everybody has got a copy of this natural medicine handout. On one side of it, there's a desired timeline. So by state statute the procedure for adopting an amendment to the land use code is first, we have to submit it to the planning commission has to submit, their approval, disapproval, or suggestions for the amendment. And then if disapproved, if the planning commission disapproves the amendments, that are being proposed, or we can't come to some kind of, amendment proposal for approval by the county commissioners, the commissioners can still move forward on it, but it has to be a favorable vote by the majority of the commissioners. Before final adoption, the county commissioners have to hold a public hearing with 14 days notice in the newspaper. And perhaps, John, you might speak a little bit more to that process.
Well, Sean, I'm gonna disagree with you.
Okay,
This is not how I understand, and this is not how we've done before. So when you look at 3028-116, you kind of have to pick a starting point.
all right,
You're either starting with the PC or you're starting with the Board of County Commissioners. It would appear that you're going down the path of starting with the PC, which
yes,
means the PC has to propose an amendment,
Okay.
not approval, denial, suggestions. That's a different process. I know it's a confusing statute, okay?
it does,
So you either start with the PC or you start with the BOCC. I don't know which one you're doing, okay? It would appear that you're starting with the PC. In that case, the PC needs to create what they are proposing as an amendment
all right.
and propose it to the BOCC.
Well, I'm coming with a bit of a boilerplate, so does that, I mean, does still work for the PC? Is start with some sort of a suggested
Well, we've
amendment?
always been more of proposing. We can't, we can't pass or amend or
Right.
require. I think that's always been
So
our
there's
position.
two processes. I want to be real clear about this.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, and a lot of you were here when the 2024 went through and, and we kind of got caught up in some of that. Amendments either start with the PC, okay? So again, that looks like that's what we're trying to do here.
Yes,
Then the PC needs to come up with whatever they're recommending for an amendment. You as staff, you as the director have put together, say sorry, you said boilerplate, whatever term you want to use. It is some proposals, okay? Well, that's a starting point for the PC, I guess, okay?
that's how I'm proposing it.
Okay,
yes.
so therefore, when the PC gets ready to propose something, they propose it up to the Board of County Commissioners.
Okay,
But that's the proposal. The other option, and we did both in the land use.
I know, that's why I brought that up. Sorry, that's why. I brought-
No, I'm glad you did.
That's okay.
Because we did both, because.
Because.
The other way is for the PC to come up with language, I'm sorry, for the Board of County Commissioners to come up with amended language, send it down to the PC, or to the PC for comment, approval, denial, suggestions, okay?
okay,
And then, then that, I guess, goes back to the Board of County Commissioners. And that second part of the statute then says, hey, they don't have to take it, but it actually doesn't mean a whole lot. It just means that a majority of them have to adopt it. That's all I want.
all right. Well, what we have proposed here is not from the county commissioners. It's from staff as a proposal for us to start a discussion on. So
That's how I understand it.
that's right. Okay, I apologize for my misinterpretation.
Sean, it's a hard statute. It's a difficult statute to read. They got a lot packed in there. So that's all I would say. So if the intent is to start with the PC, which it does sound like that's what you're trying to do,
Yes.
then the PC should just put together clear proposed amended language.
Okay.
And then in terms of timeline, is that timeline still?
This would be the
Follow.
most expedient timeline if we were to have a discussion tonight, then in our annual meeting, the 12th of February, that could be a normal PC meeting where we could propose an amendment. That would be the soonest that we could propose an amendment. And then the next steps would be that I need to send that content to be published, in the DCI, or at least notification that the Board of County Commissioners is going to have a public hearing about this amendment on the 14th of February, following that February 12th PC meeting. And then on February 20th, notice would be published in the DCI, because there's this lead time. You gotta propose it the Friday before the publishing date, and it has to be published for 2 weeks. So it would be able to make it to the commissioner meeting until March 18th. So I'm just kind of laying out that timeline so you can see there's just a lot of lead time that comes with this. So I'm trying to honor the request to expedite this as quickly as possible. So I'm laying out the timeline so you can see all the steps that are required. Does that all make sense? Okay. With that, what I wanted to do was just, again, kind of go over the legislation and regulations, have a little bit of Q&A about that, so we're all clear kind of what the parameters are for, what we can regulate in the land use code and what we can't. And then we can go into what we're proposing as an amendment to land use code. And then we can just have a discussion for the rest of the night based on that. Okay? All right. And John, it's all new then for legislation and regulation. What have we got prepared there? We've got all kinds of information we gave.
Well, I was gonna say, I don't wanna take time if it's just duplication of information that everybody already has in front of them. I mean, big picture, without. This question, Proposition 122, was placed before the voters of Colorado to allow limited legalization use and that's use in certain ways and businesses for natural medicine, and that's a very broad term, which we can get into, so it is the law, created statute, and now there's what regulations around that statute. Delta County, so. And again, not looking anything in, but there's no licensing at the Delta County level. In fact, licensing is only at the state level. So there is a limited amount of what we can regulate anyways. Effectively, what they get into is regulating around ordinances or regulations governing the time, place, and manner of natural medicine services facilities. It's interesting that they use that type of language. Time, place, and manner is oftentimes code for free speech and that sort of thing. So a lot of the constitutional approach on time, place, and manner is about where you can exercise your right to protest and these sorts of things. So it's interesting that they link that kind of language into use of natural medicine. So the state honestly did not leave a big area to regulate here, but it would need to address those types of issues of time, place, and manner. I know that there's numerous counties in Colorado that have already adopted some of this stuff, so there's some good examples out there. It also it has to be a reasonable regulation. In other words, you cannot regulate to the point that it is effectively outlawed. Okay, and there's some very specifics about you can't do this, can't do that, but you couldn't. I'll just be ridiculous. I already gave this example to a different group. Was you couldn't say, well, you can't have a natural healing center within 50 miles of any school. Right? You can't say that because that is an effective prohibition. Okay, so that's not reasonable. And I'll look at Dave too. Attorneys love to just use the word reasonable because that's where we have to look at, right? So anything has to have that rationality to it and that sort of thing. And there's tests and that sort of thing. I don't know where the PC wants to go with this sort of thing, but anyways, so maybe that's why I'll just leave it and just answer questions. I mean, that's not a big meeting. It's something that we can address. It's not required. It does seem, as Sean just mentioned, that the Board of County Commissioners is interesting to have some local regulations on it.
So natural medicine, I'm assuming this is more of the psychedelic fungi, is that like mushrooms and stuff like
I
that?
think that's some of it.
Is that,
That's how.
is there more to it than that? I mean, that was what, and I was kind of looking it up a little bit too, to try to follow a little bit more, but is that more of what that is to have more of a legalization of that? And they're gonna encompass it under what we call this natural medicine. Is that my understanding?
I think that's some of it.
Okay,
Yes.
The
so-
definition in
It
this
seems
law
like-
is
Oh.
psilocybin, psilocin, ibogaine, DMT and mescaline, like it's a very specific list of
Okay,
substances that are
but hallucinogenic
Defined.
substances,
as natural medicine. Yes.
okay, just seemed a little. not-
Whether they're licensing it, or you may have run into that, are they licensing some of those other
That's what I'm,
substances right
Yeah,
now? I
right.
read something that they're holding off on like mescaline. and that sort
Mescaline
of
is
thing.
one of the
Yes.
ones in the wings.
Okay, all right.
what I heard too.
They're trying to get, I know that they still make sure peyote is not classified in this due to the natural history of that, and there's some other particular items that they are looking to add to this act. For now, the only ones that are here are psilocybin, psilocin, and ibogaine. But that means they are, and DMT.
DMT,
And they will be looking to expand on that, and I think they're in the process
Okay.
of working out that as we all fall under the Natural Medicines Act.
that's what I was questioning. That's kind of,
Hey Brittany, I just sent you a link to, the Department of Revenue's Natural Medicine Regulation and Legislation Summary of Senate Bill. It's got a lot of great bullet points. This was in your packet, it's a summary of this Senate Bill 23-290, Natural Medicine Regulation and Legalization. They just nicely bullet pointed all the statutes so that you can understand it easily. But it lists, the natural medicines there. If you blow it up there, you can see a list there.
So, from a procedural standpoint, whatever the PC decides to do, just, you guys have heard me say this before, make it really clear. In other words, I don't know what that looks like specifically, whether it's some sort of a red line. I mean, you already have something from staff here that has built, you know, at least a good starting point, you know, even in that, how that's laid out, whether or not that's what you adopt or what you want to propose to the BOCC, that's a fold up to the PC. But just make it super clear about what is being added, or amended, I should say. And maybe send up a red line type version as well as a clean version with those things accepted, so everybody can kind of make it clear what it is. So I just have seen so many times, it's like, well, you get lost. You know, there's,
yeah,
this is not a big amendment. This is only a few pages, but obviously in the past, there was lots and lots of changes that were proposed.
In this handout that I gave you on the side that says Delta County regulation parameters, a few extractions from the statute there. The local jurisdiction, authority and limitations, it says that you may enact ordinances, regulations governing time, place, manner of operation of licenses. We may not prohibit establishment or operation of licenses. We may not prohibit transportation of natural medicine on public roads by licensed persons. And we may not adopt ordinances, regulations that are unreasonable or in conflict with historical panel job at this point.
And then what, you know, in terms of purview of planning commission, are we really dealing with location?
Pretty much.
Otherwise, it would
And-
be
And
an
manner of
ordinance that had more kind of, you know, like within the land use code, would
Well, I think time is an issue as well.
we
I
could,
mean, you could look at that on a, you know, whatever, you know, a gravel pit or whatever, you say it's only gonna operate from, you know, this time to this time or something like that. You can look at some of the staff's proposed, I think they proposed some time, I don't know anything. I don't know about processing mushrooms, okay? But it seems to me like there is a concern among some entities that are regulating this about smell and odor. I don't know. I don't know how far that carries. I don't know how prevalent it is and that sort of thing, but that also is a kind of a place if you're gonna set back, or it could be in that sense of manner if you're gonna require a scrubber or some sort of, I don't know those things, but it seems like some people are concerned about, and Everett, you may have done more reading on that, about, you know, the processing and whether that becomes a nuisance to
Yeah, I
neighbors.
think they're trying to get ahead of it for those of us who live through the marijuana law. I think they were trying to get ahead of the processing part, because if you remember right, when marijuana was first legalized, they didn't really restrict the processing, so people out there with coffee filters, butane, stripping it through PVC pipes and was turning into an explosive substance and burning down houses. So I think that was, this is they're worried about if you're using certain chemicals, they don't want any chemicals involved. And also, again, the odor and also visual part of the law is that you cannot visibly consume. So they need to make some visible obstruction. You have to have a place there's some statutes involving, well, the regulation within their licensing. They're even talking video surveillance, lit parking lots, lit entries with all blacked out entries so no one can see in. Because again, it is not lawful for it to be public.
But that's already all in state
Some of it,
regulation.
as far as the parking lot, how it's
So that's not
lit.
something we would have to propose. I mean,
Well, that
that's
goes back to manner. Think of it as a conditional use permit.
Okay.
Parking, lighting in the parking lot, again, the visual obstruction of it being unable to be seen. So think of it a lot more like a conditional use application. They're going to have a business that fits in the zoning. It is the job of the PC and Board of County Commissioners to put the conditional use for that operation.
So, and I'll just, maybe I'll drill at that, because I've not spent a lot of time with these regulations. On this second page of the staff proposed, regulations, I guess, or amendments to land use code. Are these repeats of what's in the regulations?
No, some of those, so
I mean, are some of them and some of them aren't?
I don't think that they're repeats, because this is a compilation of many different, we pulled from other different
Right,
counties.
so,
These are things that weren't really included, because outside lighting is obviously up to us. They don't put it in the regulations for the licensing.
right, downright.
You know, so they're heavily regulated on how they get licensed. If I'm not mistaken, most, if not all, of what we proposed was outside of the actual licensing, already licensing general provision. We're not doubling down.
So would the possibility of a conditional use permit being denied make us in conflict with not being able to prohibit the establishment and operation of a license per statute?
They just have to meet the conditional requirements. That's still their choice not to meet those conditions.
Right.
So it's all.
As long as they're reasonable.
Correct.
I think you're still are gonna have, yeah, I mean, you're still gonna have, well, whatever just said that, I mean, you're still gonna have regulations or you're still gonna have portions of the land use code of those that they would have to meet, and if they're denied because they didn't meet those things, hey, they're closer to a school than we say, you know, I don't think that we would get in conflict there. If they're reasonable, we can't do 50 miles, because that would prohibit it from Delta County.
And it might help if you think of it in this manner. It's legal to have a salvage operation. Just where it is and how it's operated is what we look at. So you gotta look at it that way. This is no different than anything else. Don't get yourself hung up on, well, it's legal, people can do whatever they want. You're right, I can have a salvage yard in my backyard. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have to be zoned. And it has to meet conditions.
Right.
So kind of take the whole, we can't prohibit out of that equation, look at it as a land use based theory. This is a conditional use permit.
Are there any other questions about the regulations?
Well, yeah, you sort of answered it. You cut and pasted from a bunch of regulations.
Well, from different ones. There's some that we put in, there's some regulations that are being toggled right now. Talking about like certain language, like we have in there, can't be within, I can't remember how many feet of a residential dwelling.
It says 1 mile of the dwelling. That's
Yeah,
one of my
some of
first
them are,
points, 'cause I'm
there's-
trying to figure
yeah.
out.
because some of that is up to, there's the state legalized definitions for the requirements. It specifically indicates distances from schools
That childcare.
and so on and so forth.
We have to put it in.
Of resident, the licensing, the addition of some counties have put it to any residential structure. So that's outside of the already established licensing requirement.
So the 1 mile from the school is part of the state statute.
That's correct.
Yes.
Is it? That was 1,000.
1,000 feet.
1,000 feet.
1,000 feet.
1,000 feet, yes, yeah.
Yeah. That's what I would-
And that's a state licensing.
And that's what I originally had in there was 1,000 feet, but one mile got stuck in. there, and
I was gonna wonder where you got 1 mile more.
Yeah. Again, this is just a starting point for discussion, so it's not, you know, we can make comments throughout. And we can move to the land use code, you know, proposed amendment if you'd like. But I didn't want to get off of like any questions you have about regulations before we start there.
I have a basic question. The R1/C zoning district,
Rural, industrial, commercial.
industrial, commercial, okay. And those seem to be located near populated areas. They seem to be, when I look at the map, a lot of them are near the towns.
We have,
Yeah, could you pull up the zoning?
I'm working on it. I'm
Yeah.
very sorry.
we had GIS actually, locate all the rural, industrial, commercial zoning.
And then you have the red dots for the.
The red dots were within 1 mile. Or
Right.
what were the red dots?
So these were a set of maps that, Kate had put together. This is gonna be different from what you're gonna see on the GIS map.
Okay.
Hers were identifying where we had schools and childcare facilities, and then we're showing, the red dots would be where there were, rural, industrial, commercial, properties within that, I think 1,000-foot, and 1 mile, area.
There you go.
Does that make sense? So if there was a
So
rural.
the pins are schools and the red dots are where RIC is.
But
I had trouble with that.
Yeah, I-
I didn't know what those
Yeah.
maps were.
In the map say 1 mile, I don't see anywhere where it says 1,000 feet.
okay, it says
Yeah.
1 mile.
It's all based on.
Oh, well, that's incorrect.
Well, we did both on the GIS map here, where we showed boundaries of out 1,000 feet and then out 1 mile. From these, from childcare and, schools. And so that's what's being shown up there on the screen right now.
Do we have any other uses in the code that we require a mile? Or is that gonna be new? I don't think there's any-
I'm not aware of any that we require a mile setback from. That's pretty,
I didn't know we'd switch to a mile.
yeah,
Well, that's, I knew it was about.
The mile.
We were talking about. We can just.
I guess we just kind of circle back to, you know, basic regulatory and legislative questions, and then it does seem like there's interest from a lot of the group to kind of discuss this
yeah,
distance.
Basically, as long as we stay within the purview of time, place, and manner, we're not gonna be getting outside of our lane over state statute.
I'd say that is your lane, but your lane is only so wide. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the timing of it has been pushed by the DRTC. I assume they just wanna get county regs.
they want something in place before people go getting licenses
You bet.
and then they're permitted to go, you know, be.
Go
located
anywhere, it's gonna become a heyday.
Well, as it is stated right now, as they are processing applications, I think there's 5 being processed, because I got on the site today. It seems like there's 5 facilities being processed at this time.
Statewide?
Yeah,
Oh.
so
Statewide or Delta?
statewide.
Statewide.
And then there's 41 owners being processed and stuff like that. So the thing it is according to their rules and our land use code, if they get, so when they apply for the license, they're supposed to check with the county to see if they have any regulations in place.
Hmm.
And if they do not, they go off of their licensing requirements, which aren't gonna be
Accurate.
as restrictive or have any kind of restriction to them. And if they get that license, just like land use code 21 versus 24, once
Yeah.
it's there, it's there.
So the sooner we can be consistent and transparent about what's happening, the better we're not gonna go back and try to fix issues of things happening that. people-
Well, once they're in, they're done.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
And that's just a clarification. Their regs are already 1,000 feet.
Yeah,
correct.
Yeah.
Right,
So that's
that's a done deal.
That's the minimum.
That's correct.
in that section.
If you'd like to kind of move to the land use code, I think we could start discussing that. Kind of four areas that we identified where we would make amendments. The first would be in chapter 2, under zoning districts and land use, and with table 2B, where it lays out all the zoning districts and the allowed uses or the conditional uses or limited, whatever kind of permit you need. So we added in under sexually oriented businesses there. We put in 2 lines because you may want to have different kinds of permits in different zones for the different types of natural medicine facilities. So we put in healing centers, which would be where natural medicine is provided to people, and then there's counseling services and such to accompany it. And then there's natural medicine cultivation, manufacturing, or testing facilities. Does that make sense? So there's those 2 types of facilities, we kind of broke them out, and then suggested conditional use permit in rural industrial commercial zone. And the others. So that's, again, let's just go through this and then we can come back to each one of these sections and we can chew it up. Does that sound good? The next section is actually in chapter 2 also, then it gets into use specific standards for commercial uses. So it's section 4D, commercial uses. The only thing that's currently in there is sexually oriented businesses. Seemed like a logical place to kind of follow that with natural medicine businesses. And this is where the majority of the content is at. This is what we would go to when if we were to go with the conditional use permit, these would be the conditions that we would be considering for natural medicine facilities. Let me scroll down a little bit. So the ones that are, so let's just read it and we can all get an idea of what's in here. Natural medicine businesses are regulated under the authority of the statute 4450-101 through 904. In addition to all other applicable standards of this code, natural medicine businesses shall meet the following standards. Location. No natural medicine business that provides natural medicine business services shall be located within, let me just say 1,000 feet to start with, so we don't have this big as a big problem, okay? 1,000 feet of a place of assembly, daycare, dwelling unit, or school measured by the setbacks as outlined in state statute referenced. Setbacks related to natural medicine businesses shall not be modified from the state regulations and is not eligible for a variance to the code. No natural medicine business shall be operated as a home business.
There's a home exemption in the statute.
Okay? Let's mark that on your paper and let's go
We
back.
can dive into that.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Hours. Natural medicine healing centers and natural medicine businesses that provide natural medicine services shall only operate between the hours of 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. Again, this is just a starting point for discussion. Right? Entry and visibility. The interior of the use shall be configured so that there is no visibility of interior activities from outside of the building through windows or doors. All activities of natural medicine businesses shall occur indoors. No person under 21 years of age shall be permitted into the facility. Security. All facilities in which natural medicine products are cultivated, manufactured, tested, or stored shall be located within a permanent building with restrictive access and may not be located within a trailer, tent, or motor vehicle. Primary entrances, parking lots, and exterior walkways shall be clearly illuminated with downward-facing security lights to provide after-dark visibility for facilitators, participants, and employees. Video surveillance shall be required at outside entrances, exits, parking lots, and storage areas. waste. Natural medicine businesses shall provide a secure disposal plan of natural medicine and natural medicine product remnants or byproducts based on, this is a regulations from the Department of Revenue that issues the licenses. Natural medicine and natural medicine product remnants or byproducts shall not be placed within the facility's exterior refuse container. Healing centers shall provide a post-treatment transportation plan for patients that ensures the safe transport of patients from the facility to their destination. Natural medicine cultivation and manufacturing may be accessory uses to a natural medicine healing center in any zone allowing natural medicine healing centers, provided that the cultivation manufacturing occupies no more than 20% of the total floor area of the facility. Processing of natural medicine. The processing of natural medicine that includes the use of hazardous materials, including without limitation, by way of example, flammable and combustible liquids, carbon dioxide, and liquefied petroleum gases such as butane, prohibited from residential buildings. Non-hazardous materials. Non-hazardous materials used to process natural medicine shall be stored in a manner so as to mitigate and ensure odors are not detectable beyond the property boundaries on which the processing facility is located or the exterior walls of the processing facility associated with the processing of natural medicine. The processing of natural medicine shall meet the requirements of all adopted building and life safety codes. We don't have your codes, but. This one.
Under this one here, security. Could we add that every facility should be wired with an alarm system, reporting directly to church office? Yeah, that looks like.
Just write it down.
Write that down
We can
there.
propose it.
Let's go back through this after we get through reading it all. The processing of natural medicine, okay, let's see, I guess I'm on the last point. No natural medicine business without a license from the Natural Medicine Division of the Department of Revenue will be permitted in any zoning district of Welta County. So that kind of covers the section, like I said, under use specific standards so that we can reference those use specific standards in a conditional use permit. The next section that probably is relevant to this discussion is rezoning. So if we do restrict it to a zone like rural industrial commercial, obviously people that are not in that property not in that zone may want to rezone the property so that they can have a natural medicine business there. We didn't think that there was any need to do any amendments to that portion of the land use code, though, as it is, would suffice for any rezoning application for that need or desire. But I put it in here for our consideration, that's something to think about.
Don't be run the risk that someone, or that you're gonna have applicants for rezoning. It's gonna be rezoned rural industrial commercial. Then that parcel is rezoned. And, these types of businesses may come and go, who knows, and that sort of thing. And then we're spot zoning rural industrial,
Yeah.
wherever people are.
That's right.
It still has to fit the requirements to be rezoned, and that's one of the things we have in there, we don't allow for that. They have to have a good reason for the rezone, have to fit the surrounding areas.
I
Is a good reason.
wanna do a natural medicine business, that's not a good reason.
It's arguable.
Well, we may consider allowing it more than just rural industrial commercial for that very reason.
Just trying to anticipate what may come up for you.
Yeah, I mean, we can read the rezoning, approval standards, but they're, I think that they would, possibly prevent that sort of spot zoning, and also they're pretty challenging to get through.
So just out of curiosity, why do we have it as not allowed in A35, A28.5?
It's just a proposal to start with. So if the planning commission would like to propose otherwise, you may.
Cause I think, you know, it's a good point, if it's allowed in other areas, and then, you know, if you have specific zones, you know, res one, just like not allowed. That I think prohibits the chance of, you know, somebody coming in wanting to rezone specifically for it.
Yeah, so should we start kind of back up at the top and discuss, propose, talk about each of these kind of sections that have amendments to them? And the last part was definition.
Definition of, yeah, natural medicine business, which comes right from the licensing regulations from Department of Revenue. Means any of the following entities licensed pursuant to the Natural Medicine Code: a healing center, natural medicine cultivation facility, a natural medicine products manufacturer, a natural medicine testing facility. And then we just referenced that regulation for further definitions related to natural medicine.
So should we start back at the top at the table 2B, where we always like to start and come back to?
Yeah, I'd start, to Todd's point, I think allowing it in A35, A20, and even A5, if it means our setback requirements would make sense, partly due to the having pot zoning, but also in my mind, this isn't quite the same as weed in that, or in pot shops, because we're not looking at retail marijuana sales, we're not looking at retail mushroom sales. These are more treatment facilities, and so having them out in the boonies may be actually more beneficial than having them next to a salvage yard. So, I guess,
I agree with Jacob. That was one of the points I was gonna make. It seems like if you get these out farther away from people, you don't have those spatial requirements. And it would be, it might make more sense that way than trying to limit them to the R1C and then have them a mile from the dwelling. I don't know.
but I'd say we still keep them C, if we're gonna want to see them come through and make
Sure.
sure they're gonna be good neighbors. But I'd say we go C all the way across 35, 20, A5, and then we're all industrial. And keep it
And what
out.
about A25? I mean, I guess if they're meeting all the other requirements of
Sure.
lighting, security, setbacks, you know, there's potentially a property that's zoned res 1, but is a 10-acre property with plenty of space for this sort of thing. Like, is there a reason why, or thoughts from staff of why you started with just?
We went with the least restrictive.
I can address that. So here's the thing, is all of our land use codes are based on what? Public health and safety. The issue with the treatment centers is the fact there's a lot of unknown there. Are we gonna put them on our public highways further from hospitals for medical treatment? How far are they gonna drive from the outskirts to get to town? The idea is, this is also part of the concerns we talked to the Sheriff's Department and different things. The problem is right now is we have no idea how long the effects last to determine when a person's safe to operate a vehicle. It is unknown, untested, and unproven. Furthermore, there was already an article for a guy who was a pilot, was catching a ride, was in a jump seat, had been to a treatment center, I think it was like 48 hours. Prior to the flight, he was still affected, thought the engines were on fire, got out of his jump seat, pulled the extinguishing for the engines, almost killed 80 people.
Oh my.
We do not know. So, based on health and safety, does it not make sense to keep them close to medical facilities. Easier transportation, shorter drive distances. Also, that's why we added the transportation plan. But the purpose behind this was, again, to keep this in areas that was immediately accessible to emergency services. And also closer to areas that hopefully we can keep them from driving in the middle of nowhere at night. Unknown if
Those areas
they're.
are also, just to touch on what you're saying, I think also they're a little bit more monitored. You start to get into a more secluded area. I think sometimes things tend to stay more in the legit business. To add to your lane about the security, I think when it's more visible, it's not, I think that it's watched a little bit more. So I would be more proposed to see, like you're saying, more next to an urgent care facility or something that's more in light of what we see versus,
And that's also this
because
is.
it's so
one
new,
of
we
the-
don't know what's gonna happen,
When I went through all the other counties on their recommendation,
right?
almost all of them are resident or rural industrial commercial zones. They all restricted it to rural industrial commercial.
So I hadn't considered your point. I think it's a valid point, and I'm just gonna present devil's advocate, the other side of the coin. I have no opinion about whether it's right or wrong. I have heard a lot of people, especially in the veteran community, suffering from PTSD, who are getting tremendous help from these types of therapies. I could see somebody being comfortable to use these therapies if they were able to be somewhere where there's not thousands of eyes watching them walk into this building. That's one thought I have. Your point is excellent, and I hadn't thought about that. But I think that's something that should be considered as well.
My thought is, when I first saw this is, as it's proposed by staff, it's the same, a healing center is the same as the cultivation, manufacturing and testing facilities. And I can see a lot of places where a healing center, it's like one therapist and a person, whether it's out in 835 or in a Res 1, pretty low impact, pretty secure in terms of maybe how much product they're keeping on hand versus a manufacturing location that is gonna have maybe more odors, a greater necessity for security. Like, why are we considering these the same parameters for both, kind of two parts of the industry?
Right. You're saying on the therapy side differently than on the manufacturing side, is what you're
Yeah,
thinking?
I would be inclined to put a conditional use in every zone for a healing center, provided that they meet the requirements of setbacks, security, kind of all the things. And maybe we need to add something that's a little bit more specific about emergency service access, parking lots or turnarounds or whatever, it can't be at the end of a dead end street or something. But that we'd a little bit more restrictive on the areas that seem like they require a little bit more.
So I'm gonna bring some up. We have one of these running in Delta County right now, right? Okay, it's right across the street from my house.
Actually, there's more than one.
There you go.
Okay, so I live right across the street from one of these. You wanna see a shit show? You wanna see things go on that I don't wanna throw these people under the bus too bad, cause they try really, really hard. But we're out in the middle of the boonies, in the middle of nowhere. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, you got people screaming, yelling. The next thing you know, you got firearms going off. You got people getting in cars, driving down the road, doing whatever the hell they want. Jumping in a pond. I mean, it is not like we all envision.
This is the.
Well, but this is not a licensed
This would not be
facility.
like-
But the thing is if you're if Delta County is going to go ahead, and it sounds like we don't have a choice, but we're forced to live with this. I got a really good friend, well, I had a really good friend, blew his brains out last summer in June because of this natural medicine stuff, because his trip didn't turn out good. And ended up blowing his brains out. So there are some definite negatives to this. And you better get a good thumb on it and not willy-nilly it. Because you're gonna have innocent people that have the possibility of getting hurt over this.
So Tony, knowing that it is a state regulation. And what you just said, what would your envision be? If we had a way to propose this or suggest regulation of where it would be,
You gotta,
how do you see it differently?
you have to have a pretty secure facility.
Okay,
We don't know what the long-term effects of this are. We don't know if 48 hours after you do your treatment or 5 days after we don't know when you're back to being normal.
so supervision of some type,
And you better have medical staff on site.
Okay.
And you better be able to lock these people down.
I don't think we can do all that.
I don't think
we
that's our
require medical
purview.
staff. All we can do is the
then-
body space and.
But just like any other medical thing that goes on. I mean, it's, in my eyes, this is extremely concerning. And I understand the benefits, cause I've got the other side of it too. But the willy-nilly thing and, oh, let's let it in every zoning and let's put it wherever and all this. You have to somehow protect the rest of the county or the rest of the citizens that don't agree with this. Because we
How
don't
is it
have,
different than other substances that are consumed legally? Knowing that there's differences in the way that these substances interact with people's psyche and whatnot, but it's legal to host a wedding where everyone's allowed to drink and get wild. And we've allowed for, wedding venues on any of these properties in any of these zones. There's dangers to all sorts of things. And I think, we have to think about, given that the regulated licensing of these facilities already has some of these protections built in. And that we're not allowed to stick our fingers into all of those components. But how can we make sure it's the safest it can be within our purview? A wedding venue, we require or have required driveways or access points that, emergency vehicles can get to.
we know the
There's-
effects of alcohol because we've been using it for the last 1,000 years. On a commercial basis or whatever you want. This is something that's, it's new. But it's something
uncharted
that's,
water, I mean,
but we don't, it's already been stated, we don't know what the long-term effects and what the ramifications of this. Just because somebody's over his trip and he gets in his car and drives back to Denver, is he really okay?
How can we control that, I
Well,
guess?
One helpful distinction to keep in mind too is that this is, and help me out here, Everett, because you've been deep diving into this for last week, but we're talking about facilities that are businesses, that are commercial, that where remuneration.
Correct.
Got that word out right, is involved, okay? Which means anything of value, including money, real property, tangible and intangible personal property and contract right, a service and any right of use or employment or promise or agreement connected therewith, a business promotion or commercial activity. That's a big sentence, but you get the idea. It's for commercial facilities. These have to be licensed. There's a lot of room for people to use psychedelics, natural medicines, and, they can grow it, they can use it. We can have parties at your house and people can share it. And as long as there's no exchange of money or, we're not paying for this, we're not getting services, That all can still happen. So we're talking about facilities though, that have to be licensed, because they're commercially promoting it, they're accepting money in exchange for their services or their product. This is what we're creating land use code regulations for.
The recreational use is legal?
Yeah.
Individual use is legalized.
So, I mean, for instance, your neighbor, if they don't charge these
Yeah.
people and they just have get-togethers and they share mushrooms and do their thing, that may still go on if they're operating within their allowed personal use, the rules.
I got a question from John. John, what's the liability of these so-called treatment centers? If somebody leaves there under the influence and causes a death?
You're gonna have to ask the attorney for that. This is all, I mean, what are we saying? This is all new. Nobody ever did, right? But yeah, clearly, I mean, you see bars getting, and liquor stores getting sued under certain situations. Yeah, I mean, if I was in a healing center, I would be real concerned about that. I'd be real concerned about what kind of liability insurance and that sort of things.
Well, I grew up in the hippie area. And I had a friend that took a trip on mushrooms one time. And he had flashbacks 2 weeks later. And he was just totally out of control. It's lucky he had some friends around when it happened.
So I think it's, again, important to distinguish that we're talking about licensed facilitators and licensed treatment
Yeah.
centers. And there are rules and regulations around how those facilitators get their licenses. Again, it's new, we don't really know, it might be untested, there might be some flags out there, but what we are talking about are licensed businesses that are following the rules and the regulations of the state, who have done some research based on other states or based on data, not necessarily collected by the federal government, but what we are talking about is not anyone out there that is going on a mushroom trip. And that's what we have to decide what the regulations around are. So whether you agree with whether they're dangerous or not, whether you agree with whether the facilitators know what they're doing, it's not really our purview. We have to kind of trust that the regulations that are in place by the state are trying to catch some of these risks. And that like, we can only determine so much based on the land use code. So, I don't know, I just want to kind of call us
Yeah.
back to
That's what I
Not
was
our
trying to
job.
say too, yeah.
I think
These are
if we
businesses.
implement this thing and we get started in it, we kind of keep it somewhat restrictive and somewhat organized, so we can keep an eye on it, figure out what's gonna happen. We don't allow it to go any and everywhere in the county, because I don't think the county has a great big budget to force all this stuff. So if it's somewhat controlled and we get down the road 5 years and it's not causing major issues, well, then we can look at maybe letting it out in more places.
So you're saying now keep it more industrial, commercial.
Yeah, keep it where it belongs for right now, and let's see what happens and see what the side effects and the growing pains are, and keep it so we got control of it.
What is the local, maybe you can ask, local law enforcement, what are their thoughts about this particular proposal, if you happen to know?
I've talked to a few, I've talked to the sheriff, undersheriff, a few others. We all went through the growing pains of marijuana.
Yeah.
One of the biggest kickers on this, predictability and known responses. There aren't any.
Yeah.
This is why the bigger concerns of being further from metropolitan areas, what happens to our law enforcement and purview. We're spread thin as it is.
Mhm.
The further out you go, the less there are. And same thing for emergency services, fire department, everything to do with everything. There's people who have lit themselves on fire while tripping.
So you're thinking industrial, commercial, that's kind of where they're,
The idea is there's overlap. You got state patrol,
Yeah.
county and city.
Okay.
You have also like I said, the general concerns is there's no way to know. It's so unknown that I mean, and in my law enforcement career, some of the most crazy things are trying to take a person into custody who is tripping. People driving over the Grand Mesa saying, what are you doing? Oh, I'm sightseeing for lions, tigers, and bears. And then when they tell you they've seen 4 or 5 tigers, and they're operating a motor vehicle. And it's an hour for me to get back to the jail. You know, this is some of the concerns about allowing it to be in areas that we can't cover, and there's a higher risk because of the coverage. And again, the main thing is there's no predictability here. As Tony mentioned, alcohol is known. The difference with alcohol is people go out, they get drunk, they act a certain way. There's certain predictions that are all fall in a general area. Dealing with the people who are in a psychedelic moment, there is no prediction. There's no stability. There's no, some people are perfectly fine. It's very medicinal. There are others, I have war vets, same thing. However, some don't, and it's not a guarantee every time. One person can do it fine one time, it's helpful, the next time it could be completely disastrous.
So bring us back to our first edit on this document, with staff knowing that we have mixed feelings about this, maybe they look at one other zone, that would be open. If not, you come back to us, you know, we're not voting on this tonight, so.
no,
Well, I like Kate's point, you know, you could put the cultivation in more zones than the healing center. And those could maybe be located closer.
I
like
think you were saying the opposite.
You know, to be honest, I was saying the opposite
Opposite.
because cultivation and manufacturing is gonna involve, greater volume of storage, like greater security risk, I guess I would think.
Oh, well, I just
And
think of a grow house, like you're growing mushrooms.
yeah,
It would be in the
but
country.
as you say that, like, you know,
It's a
this,
12 by 12
it would be
space.
the opposite.
That's it.
But I thought a 12 by 12 space was just personal growing.
12 by 12,
Anyway.
the county can choose to expand that
Expand that.
space, but it is a 12 by 12.
Yeah, considering people's safety, health and safety concerns, I agree, Dave, that it'd kind of be the
Well, the issues
opposite.
that are coming up is.
Yeah,
people
the issues that I'm
having to
hearing are
respond.
such.
To somebody that's in trouble.
Well, don't light your house on fire in Crawford, cause we'll just be there in time to keep the neighbors from burning down.
I guess from my point of view, these activities with a licensed facilitator are hopefully safer than, as you're saying, personal use is now legalized wherever. We're not gonna prevent people having a bad trip out in the boonies that is gonna require law enforcement to intervene. I think also the way our zoning maps are, you know, 835 could be, it's not gonna be as close to major services as Res 1. But there's nothing that says an 835 in of itself is all that much farther from emergency services. I mean, generally, I don't know if like that zone is the way we're getting at whether law enforcement and emergency services are really gonna be overly taxed by this. But
They don't know that
yeah, I guess we don't know.
Can we talk about the 2A location? I have questions there. I mean, we talked about the 1 mile limit and the statute requires 1,000 feet. Is the place of assembly in the state statute code of regulations?
Hold, please.
No.
I don't believe it is.
I know, well, I just noticed that those are highlighted
They
here.
are highlighted.
Place of assembly
Yep.
dwelling units.
Yep,
And so the other counties did add some things that they wanted to put in there. These are things that were added by other counties that have already been tried and adopted, which is why we threw them in there.
Okay.
So understand, we took a general approach of pulling from other counties of
Yeah.
what they had put in.
but those two that are highlighted are additional to the statute.
Okay.
Places of assembly and dwelling unit.
Will it become unreasonable to approve it as long as it's in residential, industrial or rural industrial not within 1,000 feet of a dwelling unit, because you look at the map and it's like,
Yeah.
Yeah, dwelling unit, it's gonna be
That one's
impossible
tough.
to do.
That's what I was
there would be nowhere.
And it's also not part of the set, that's an a la carte.
Yeah, I would throw my hat in the ring for eliminating the dwelling unit in place of assembly from
And we're talking thousands.
Well,
in 1,000 feet.
In the idea of places of assembly, thinking about like maybe churches that have children or schools or things of that sort, so.
Yeah.
That one may be worth.
A lot of churches are becoming schools.
Right,
But they would be designated as a school in that, or a childcare center in that sense, and
you could,
I have to follow the setbacks anyways.
yeah,
So if you look at the statute, it clearly is concerned about children.
You bet it is.
That's what it, cause it says 1,000 feet. Childcare center,
Yep.
preschool, elementary, middle, or junior or high school, or residential childcare facility. I mean, that's what their public policy, they're focusing on the
Yeah.
children.
Section.
So,
I think we just strike dwelling unit.
Yeah, we gotta get rid of the wrong unit, I think.
okay.
It was an a la
Just
carte
thinking-
stride. No one has gotten, I mean, if they adopted it, but we don't know about the challenges yet.
Yep.
We haven't heard back.
My other question is down on C. Well, the hours of operation, I know we can talk about that, but does the state statute and the Colorado Code of Regulations require that all activities of natural medicine business occur indoors?
No. They
Actually, it
have,
does say no
they have
public consumption.
parameters for what has to happen out, if it is out of doors, it has to be well secured, is what I recall reading.
I'll read you
I
the,
think there's some place where it says a healing center must
it has to
confirm that a
be,
participant is 21 years of age.
I don't
Yeah,
disagree with that, I just wanted to be indoors, you could have a nice yard thing with a fence and people can sit out there and.
Well, we wouldn't have to spell out anything that's in the state statute.
No, we wouldn't.
So the
I think
the
that,
code of regulation says for healing centers whose proposed licensed premises includes outdoor administration areas, a detailed description of the outdoor administration area, including access points, verification that the area is free from hazards, security surveillance plan is required. So the Colorado regulations allow for outdoor
Right,
access, which I can see being a potentially important part of some people's healing plan.
so then I would suggest we strike that, 'cause about all activities must be indoors.
I'm trying to find it, but just so you guys know, the Title 18 version of that says no public consumption that can be seen.
Well, okay.
Sure, but you can be
Different.
in a
Again,
backyard.
if it's screened from
Green,
view,
that's what I was saying. We-
Yeah.
it
leave that
just
as
says
an
it
option.
can't be openly displayed or visible, which is why I have to black out the storefront and such.
Yeah, I would be in favor of striking out that part, knowing that there's already state regulation around what has to happen with outdoor
Right,
locations, and that we add information, we add more regulation about security and public view.
and I don't know if 8 to 5, Monday through Friday makes sense with the treatment facility or treatment process.
That has been brought up in argument in the other cases as well.
Okay,
Other counties struggled with that same thing.
okay.
I don't know that this point C necessarily excludes portions of a business being outside. It's just saying that the interior of the use shall be configured in such a way that it's not visible from outside.
But then it says all activities have to occur indoors.
Okay,
Yeah, it
there you
does.
go. That's the part that you have.
That's-
Yeah, the screening part, I don't have a problem.
All right,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah, the official legal term is no open and public display or consumption.
Right.
So again, that throws screening into the mix.
Lane had a question about requiring alarm systems in addition to video surveillance and lighting under the security section. What are people,
I think that'd be a prime target for kids. Possibly to go out there and break in and steal stuff that they couldn't afford otherwise.
Is that required with the pot shops?
They're required to have, well, not the alarm systems. Again, that would be an à la carte. But again, also remember, we are putting this in as a conditional use permit.
Right.
So these are, think of it as any other, again, try to think of it as any other land use code, land use.
I think just as a point of comparison, you know, if we're talking about otherwise kind of
Yeah.
restricted substances are, you know, pot shops are kind of the only other example, or well, pot shops and you know, liquor stores for that matter. Do we require alarm systems for those kind of places that hold substances that we don't want kids to get a hold of or don't want people stealing?
And most of your liquor stores are in municipalities where there's more traffic anyway.
Right.
If these are gonna be more isolated, it makes them a bigger target, I would say.
Because you're talking about the cultivation places being outside of our general restriction.
Well, this is regardless of what zone we're talking
Yeah.
about. We're talking about the point E security. Lane brought up. We're require, you know, the proposal is to require lighting and video surveillance systems. Are alarm systems something that as a planning commission, we feel like need to be added to that?
Not if we're not requiring anyone else to do it. Personally, if there's video surveillance, security lights, I feel okay with that.
On section H. Why are we limiting the cultivation manufacturing portion to no more than 20% of the total floor area of the facility? Where'd that come from?
It was from some other ordinance, from some other jurisdiction that I pulled and threw in there, because if people wanted to combine a healing facility with a cultivation facility, do you want to think about the area that you want to restrict them to for cultivation or for testing or for manufacturing? If there's also healing center activities and services being provided in the same facility, it was just food for thought.
It seems really specific to me without having a clear reason
Well,
why
if you
that,
if you end up splitting them out in the table
yeah.
as distinct types of operations and you permit them in different zones, you know, or whatever, then you may need to grapple with, you know, what to do with the facility that wants to bring those functions together.
I guess the, like the 20% floors, that seems like very specific without like
No reason.
a reason, seems like overly.
Well, I thought you could only.
And that's, I was gonna bring it up
Yeah.
again.
The
It is a
maximum.
12 by 12 is the general cultivation space. So 12 feet high, 12 feet wide, and they can fill the whole space of that, and that is a lot of mushroom.
Just maybe the principle is, you know, if you think about splitting these out in the table again, and somebody wants to bring the two kinds of functions together, what's the issue there that you may want to think about? Maybe it's not area restrictions, but
It'd
it's
probably just
something
be
else.
majority, you know, or a majority healing center, or a majority cultivation. Depending on when you apply, whichever one is taking up more of, I guess I don't know if it's floor space or if it's commercial input or output or whatever, but.
There are state regulation, the state regulation has information about, or, you know, has regulation about co-location, of these facilities.
So maybe it'd be best.
Nothing seems to be related to square footage.
But maybe the
There's
reason-
inventory limits and separate licensing requirements.
Is there a
Um,
concern with even allowing manufacturing and healing centers to be in the same area? Like, I mean, you don't see like a dispensary that they walk out the back door and go pick a few buds and bring it inside because they ran out of inventory. You don't see a liquor store where they go in the back and like, oh, we're mixing up a batch of beer right now. We're never gonna run out. Like, is it good for there to be a separation of supply and consumption?
It's allowed under the state regulation,
Therefore, we can't do it.
so we can't disallow it.
There might be a reason. why
other
people
than
don't
allowing
get
certain things in certain zone, if we disallow certain businesses in certain zones.
Right,
The co-location requirements, say that if any natural medicine business is co-located with a healing center, restricted areas should be designated and that they should not overlap with administration areas. So basically, you know, like a manufacturing area can't, and when they say administration area, I think they refer to administering the substance. Not like the front desk,
Office.
office space.
I have a point of order. I could read the statute here.
Sure.
What we're talking about is 4450-402, natural medicine cultivation facility license. Natural medicine cultivation facility license may be issued to a person who cultivates regulated material medicine and transfer and distribution of natural medicine healing center licenses, natural medicine, product manufacturer licenses, or other natural medicine cultivation facility licenses. Natural medicine, in this section 2, natural medicine or natural medicine product must not be consumed on the natural medicine cultivation facility licensee's licensed premise unless the licensed premise is co-located with a natural medicine healing center license and licensed premises. So what we're getting at is these are there is a state mandate in place for when they get their license.
so perhaps if there is an event of a co-location application, we could just refer to this part of the statute
So
to.
and I'm guessing that it would also be a part of their license because that's the whole licensing side. They're gonna have just like a well permit. Is just bringing an example. It's for one residence or it's for 2 residences and metering well. Their licenses are gonna have a lot of the same, from what I've researched, are gonna have a lot of the same criteria where their licenses are all gonna be a little different. And the state's the one who's gonna sort that out.
I just see this as a potential struggle if we separate healing centers from cultivation and storage and testing and whatever not. In our land use code table, that's gonna prohibit probably people from doing co-location facilities. So that's kind of, I think, what's more at play here. It's just something to be mindful of if we go back to table 2 and talk about that more.
I think at this point, we could strike H. And allow whatever we decide for the zoning. Table to determine where co-location can happen and where it can't. And in zones that we say both of those activities can happen, then they have to follow state regulations about.
Yeah.
They have to follow the parameters of their licenses.
And I think we should still go toward that industrial commercial.
So I've been reading this proposition thing over here, and there's basically 3 things we can decide. And there's only 3 things we can decide. Time, place, and manner of operation. That's it. That's all we have control over. So 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, commercial or industrial, or do we have a medical designation for anything in our land use code?
No.
And then the manner of operation is it's basically has to be safety first, and after that, it's done. And that's the 3 things we can decide. We can't decide anything else because it's go home and read the proposition.
I gotta go, you guys are doing great, this is exactly what
You can't go.
that you are designed to do, to give.
We need more than one attorney.
Pass through these things.
We got to.
I know, but if you leave, we only got one.
No, that's, I
I'm
mean,
retired.
this,
Oh.
yeah, I mean, this is encouraging to me in this water hole, you know, that this is exactly what the PC is designed to do, to add through the minutia of these sorts of things and come to a, don't wanna use
So I
that
mean,
term.
I got other shit to do, but I mean, we gotta figure out 3 things, time, place, and manner of operation, that's it.
I think
Time,
that's what
or
we're
we got-
trying to do, going through this, you know.
John, thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.
Good night.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
We're striking H.
Yeah, it can be regulated by the zoning table pretty much, right? And state statute. Okay,
I had a question about the I, the processing of natural medicine that includes the use of hazardous materials. State law already prohibits the use of known hazardous materials in the processing of legally defined natural medicine. Do we need, and then this, point one or whatever talks about residential buildings, but we were already talking about not allowing them in residential buildings. So I think we need to clarify whether or not they can happen within the residence at all. And then I'm wondering if we need to specify anything about hazardous materials, because hazardous materials are already prohibited.
Do we have any kind of understanding of what their process looks like? Like, are there any, I mean, in my mind, I think like somebody's going out and picking a mushroom and like eating them.
Freeze drying them maybe.
I can put a line on that as well. Happen to know a particular facility that what they do is people will harvest the mushrooms. The most common way for people to consume it is they freeze dry it, they then put it in coffee blenders, make it a powder, and they add it to a tea. That's been the most popular standard. The old fashioned method of eating one and throwing it back up apparently has gone out the window.
Also, like tincturing, I can imagine some of the talk about hazardous materials would be a less natural process of, extraction. A lot of whatever substances and molecules can be separated out using toxic materials and then, but
Something in, I feel like we talk about this way too much, and I think eventually as this county grows, this is something that we're gonna have to adopt at some point as some type of fire code, but can we specify that on the life and safety side of things, like you have to follow state life, like we don't have those codes, but you have to follow state life and safety regulations. Which then all of this stuff becomes unnecessary because it's covered in that.
It may be, I mean, I pulled some of these from various ordinances in other jurisdictions, and so these may be more stringent than state statutes. I'm suspecting that, like it specifies from residential buildings, like we can do it in, warehouses or other kinds of, commercial buildings perhaps. I'm talking about point one there.
Cause like on number 3 under I, there's the processing of natural medicine shall meet the requirements of all adopted building and life safety codes.
Yeah.
Could we just add state life safety codes?
Yeah.
They have a bunch of combustible fuels and burners and stuff going on in there, and they're gonna get slapped with a fire code violation. Like, you can't do that. And if you're going to do that, they have to be stored properly. There's only so much you can have. There has to be fire sprinklers in your building. Like, it becomes this whole thing. And it takes it off of our, like, trying to think through every scenario for the manner in which we're gonna allow this to be used, and puts it into something that already exists.
If it's already a part of the licensing requirement, it'll be covered obviously in the license, I would assume, for a facility. But
And I would err more on the restrictive side myself a little bit. I kind of agree with other people, and I said, we can always kind of see how it plays out a little bit before we expand it to where it can happen. Right now, there's just so many unknown parameters around this, from the way people react to the way there's just
How
too
things
much.
can be
There's just
manufactured.
too much going on. I think that we, yes, it's good to be open as a county to say, okay, hey, we're gonna comply with the state, but we're gonna also keep our citizens safe and our children safe and,
so that kind of goes,
not
Contrary to
demoralize our
Todd's point.
community of what people think of it, but when they see something, what I'm saying? I think you're gonna find those people that are just trying to set something up to make a quick dollar and not follow the safety codes or whatever. Hopefully we weed those people out. And we have more people that see the medicinal side of this and say, hey, we do see a lot of trending with people actually seeing the positives of these types of these medicinals. I mean, I can't even say I have personal history. That's hard. It's different when you have a personal experience where you could say, I've personally experienced this. that's what the part that's the hardest for me is that I don't have anybody that I know that has, you know, taken any of this, or I haven't, so it's kind of weird for me to make a comment about something or what I think somebody's gonna react, because I don't know. I mean,
Well,
So-
there's number one under eyes. And the processing of natural medicine prohibited residential buildings, so it has to be restricted to just a.
yeah, that's what I'm saying, exactly, so,
Well, so number one is saying the processing of natural medicine that includes any hazardous materials is
Right.
prohibited from residential buildings. State law, this state, the Senate bill says that
so I was looking up.
inherently hazardous substances are not allowed to be used in the manufacturing of these natural medicines anyways. They define inherently hazardous substances, meaning any liquid, chemical, compressed gas, or commercial product that has a flash point at or lower than 38 degrees Celsius or 100 degrees Fahrenheit, including butane, propane, and diethyl ether, and excluding all forms of alcohol and ethanol. So within the state law already
Right.
is that these hazardous materials are not allowed anywhere
Right.
in any of the facilities that are licensed. I think Todd's question is kind of a bigger land use code, like how we're writing the land use code in every single section. Do we need to say, and you must follow state law? I think de facto you must follow state law. And we are adding to state law. Do we need to even specify that?
But they don't have to follow state fire code in this county.
That's,
We just
Okay.
approved
Okay.
rock deal, you know, no fire sprinklers, no fire plan whatsoever, wood structure. People stay in there because they're had too much to drink from a wedding and there's no fire plan whatsoever. None.
And I would also
So
like to
is-
point out, these were all in places that had building codes for all these examples like.
Right, yeah,
They had
I think
actual
it's
in-place
tricky because we
building
don't actually have building
codes.
code.
So I just wanted to, I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
didn't want to interrupt. I want to bring that
So
up.
maybe in this case, I guess what I'm hearing Todd is like,
And maybe
I
that
don't
is
know
a
what-
building
yeah.
code, not a land use code, and that's, you know,
And this might be,
It's just- we're starting to allow a lot of things into this county that, like, as we grow, like, we better get a grip on it. Anything.
if it's in the Senate bill and if it's made it through into the licensing regulations in this form, then it's already taken care of. But if it's not, we need to know and we need to consider
But-
what restrictions we might want to put on.
yeah, and Todd is mentioning things that are beyond just whether you can use these hazardous substances, like, do we need to require, you know,
Like, why are we
Fire
gonna protect
safety.
them from getting burned down? We're not gonna protect the people at the wedding getting burned down.
Yeah, right. Good point. Just it's, you know. From a fire district perspective, sending your
Yeah.
volunteers into a building that has no fire suppression is an absolute shit show.
Yeah.
And it's not cool.
how would that work if the county adopted fire safety codes? Do those retroactively apply to like a facility that we already approved?
I think they'd be grandfathered in
Yeah.
and be everything moving forward.
It would also be in conjunction with the building code.
Sorry, didn't mean to do that.
Yeah, no, I think it's important to consider, and I think it's also kind of from what I'm getting from Jake's like, and we are getting hung up on this very particular type of business and potentially creating some like very specific conditions that we perhaps are hypocritically not applying to other types of businesses, and it seems like, you know, a business that is based on an industry that until very recently was illicit, kind of conjures up a lot more emotion and like desire for restriction than we are putting on other types of businesses.
and I think at the end of the day, the Board of County Commissioners are really, what we're trying to do is give them recommendations, right? We're not trying to, I mean, at the end of the day, they're gonna make the decision, they're gonna add in any of the additional, you know.
Yeah, if they're all conditional use permits, I mean, we can add these conditions in. If we don't have anything written in here though, as like presupposed conditions that we
Sure.
have for this, then we're going to have to imagine them at the time that we put conditions forth. And maybe they already exist in, you know, the regulations for the licensing for the facilities. That's to be determined. And as they exist in the regulations for the licensing, are they as strict as we want them to be or not is the next question.
So for number one, we're saying that already is restricted, they can't use those.
That's in the Senate. So
With the.
we would have to look at
with
the,
E and
The
D.
license regulation packet, which is
Yeah,
that indicates exact requirements for each licensing authority. It is about 107 pages long. It's light reading.
so,
So we would strike one, but we would keep two, because that talks about odors and detectable, you know.
so,
through the-
yeah, sorry, just to belabor this, now down to the Colorado Code of Regulations, which is the actual regulations that have gone in place after the Senate bill was passed. Chemical, dangerous and hazardous, oh, that's hazardous waste. Or waste related. It is unlawful to knowingly manufacture or allow manufacture of natural medicine products using an inherently hazardous substance. Defined as any liquid, chemical, compressed gas, or commercial product with flash point, blah, blah, blah. So. It seems redundant to me to have, yeah, for me, it seems redundant to have number one in there, because that's already prohibited. Number two. Seems like number two is.
I think two is also spelled out as well, but.
No, whoops.
I guess maybe my request for staff before we come back next time with trying to get some real language to the VSCC is just to review all of these to make sure they're not redundant. They're not covered by.
the licensing
Yeah.
regulation.
Yeah.
Because I just pulled up the, you know, licensing regulation and I controlled F, you know, searched for combustible and flammable, and those two words don't occur in the document.
No, it's inherently hazardous materials. And then they define what those mean, which are, I assume those temperature
Sensitive type
things are what we would consider combustible or flammable. But I don't know enough about that.
Kind of information, the 12x12 is personal cultivation.
That's what I.
Yes.
So, yeah, commercial could be a larger space. Pre-processing of natural medicines shall meet the requirements of all adopted building life safety code. We don't have building or safety codes, so is this
Night, sir.
Thank you.
irrelevant? Is it retroactive if they're are imposed in the future? Do we want to specify state? Because the county doesn't have any.
You know, one way to kind of look at a statement like that, though, is that if there are any kinds of safety codes that we want to appeal to as a condition for a conditional use permit, then we have something in here to say, you know, this is part of the conditional use for this natural medicine businesses, you know.
You know, just strike building.
Yeah.
Safety.
Strike what?
Building, yeah, that's what I would think as well.
Certain people catch wind of building codes in this county.
And maybe even, maybe even adopted, because then I could see them, like, you can't give me that condition because it's not adopted.
Well, he's saying like in the conditional use permit process, we could apply a safety, a really far
A
out there,
condition based on that.
putting everything in.
My question is more like whether it's state or county, like Todd's talking about.
Life safety would have to be state,
Yeah,
because we just don't have.
should it say requirements of all state life safety codes? As adopted is sort of a confusing, term to me in terms of what we're talking about, which jurisdiction has adopted them or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, we don't have any adopted building codes in unincorporated Delta County, so I mean, again, I robbed some of this as just
Yeah.
like starting points for
Yeah.
thinking, so.
Maybe, Drake, yeah, because we start pointing to codes and be like, what codes?
What? So we replace adopted building and with the word state.
Okay, that was the bulk of it. Good job, guys.
Yeah.
We still have to go back to table 2B at some point. I don't know how we're gonna get to, done this on the city.
So I should read all the BS stuff.
You don't have to as well.
Well, no, that you make better informed decisions.
We appreciate it.
Do you guys have any recommendations for how we can like be, as prepared as possible for February 12th? Like, is there a way I can facilitate? Could I send this to you all, for example, in a Word format, and then you can all put individually your comments in there or something? I can pull them together, aggregate it. I don't know. I'm just throwing out suggestions.
Yeah, having an editable.
Oh, boy, probably.
Yeah, whatever they call that in Word or Google
Yeah.
Docs, where we can contribute comments or propose language.
Each of you individually, right? And then I can receive your individual ones back and then try to like pull together what commonalities or something like that. Is that?
Be fun.
I think anytime anyone has like specific proposed language, the more helpful that is, so,
Make some of the changes that we've discussed.
I can make a few of the changes, yeah, and note them, like.
I mean, Todd made a comment about the fire. I know that Lane made a comment about, definitely some kind of a security system that would alert authorities. Is that what you're thinking? Okay, that was one of the ones I heard from you. Tony was talking about more industrial, commercial.
State have requirements for the hospitals and them that are built in unincorporated Delta County with no building code. Does a medical community, because this is a medical facility, right? Does the state have a set of requirements that say, being you're going to treat people with mental disorders or whatever, you're a medical facility, does the state have a set of requirements that you have to follow?
It's under the licensing part. I have a whole folder full of all the actual hard documents for this. It's 107 pages of regulation that's available.
So, I mean, that, if we all read that and went through it, might make this whole thing a lot simpler.
Because it lines out a lot of what we are talking about, which is why we kind of didn't get into it, is because the licensing facility has these requirements for the license. Some
And
don't
then
flip
can-
through, but
If all that's in there, can we make these facilities have to be new so they follow all of the guidelines?
they're not allowed to get licensed without following those regulations.
So do they have to build new facilities to do this? Or take an old one and update it to the guidelines?
I don't know that that's specified from what I read.
You would have to prove that you check all the boxes.
Yeah.
Whether you're retrofitting a building, whether you're building something new, whether it's.
Just can't be a bus.
Would it be
Or an
safe to
RV.
say that everybody would agree that it should be a conditional use permit in whatever zone?
Yes, I
Okay.
think so.
So then it's just kind of massaging these, use standards and then determining which zones we want to
Mhm.
have it be a conditional use in, right?
Yeah, like I
Yeah.
said, for staff, you heard some squabbling between us. If you don't think there's any changes, we as planning commission members can bring changes on the 12th.
Okay.
And I would imagine you should expect changes
Okay.
on that final anyway, so. That goes to, we will send you comments for you to redline, but at the end of the day, my fellow commissioners, if you want something in that doesn't reflect, you come to the 12th with your language and we vote on it.
So Ben's on computer illiterate. Can somebody send me a link to the licensing requirements and all that stuff so that I don't have to go try to find it?
Is that different than what's in our packet already, Everett?
I don't know what's in your
The-
packet. I have a whole other.
The packet has the licensing requirement regulations in it, the 107-page document. It's in there.
You gonna put it on audio book for us?
Be a really bad meeting. Health and safety concern.
Very hard.
I did have one comment. I think if we could break out, or if we're allowing, or, this language is allowing is tricky. If we're permitting, if healing centers and the other forms of natural medicine businesses have separate, areas, separate zones they're allowed in, or conditionally permitted in. I think the definition section needs to break out a definition for a healing center versus, I think the definitions need to reflect what
Okay.
the wording in table 2B.
Great.
And we I think we're dealing with this rezoning issue by talking about table 2B. Seems like.
We didn't really look too much at the map. We want to pull it up real quick there. This is only on the planning department's GIS map, so I can't share it out with you.
Yeah.
The best we could do is were the maps that Kate provided, which identified, like I said, the schools and the registered childcare facilities throughout the county. And then it showed a circle out around them. On this map, you can zoom in maybe somewhere around Delta or something, or I don't know.
So what's the yellow?
The yellow is the 1,000-foot, the orange,
Around a childcare center, around
childcare,
those
right?
restricted areas.
Now, the blue areas are the rural industrial commercial zone. So maybe zoom out a little bit. Yeah, you can see there's one in there, but it's
Yeah.
absorbed by the,
I would just think that a lot of those are gonna have an overlap, and I'm worried about, we
You
can
can-
talk about this later. I'm worried about this becoming an unreasonable regulation because schools are generally gonna be
that,
located in higher density areas where also,
that's what we
Yeah.
were trying to prove by it though. If you zoom out more, sorry, find some place where you can see some blue areas. Because those are the rural industrial commercial zones. You'll have to kind of zoom in enough to get the map to reflect the zoning.
it seems like the yellow just covers up the blue.
Well, there are some blue patches around, for example, that are outside. Yeah. So in terms of proving that we're not utterly restricting the ability for people to get licensed facilities in Delta County, if we add, 1,000-foot or a mile setback, it is possible.
I would love to see that without the mile, since we seem to have a consensus about the 1,000-foot
All right,
mile thing.
let's see if we can,
If we can eliminate the orange circles.
right.
So what about people that do homeschooling? How's that fall into
That's
this?
still at school.
So let's go.
So
Really?
we could have.
They have to register.
Oh, you bet they do.
Interesting.
But we don't have them reflected on our
On the
GIS.
map, sure.
So that's interesting.
I didn't know that homes.
I mean, how is it different than any residence that has a child?
Think of it as daycare centers too.
Well, daycare centers, I understand.
Daycare to my child.
Registered
So,
daycare.
we gotta go back to finding the zoning where this thing fits and keeps this away from all those problems that can come up in the future, because somebody moves in next door to a facility and all of a sudden they register as a school, the facility's gotta go.
That's the first. You just can't do that to somebody.
Well, no,
What would you think? What would you think, Tony? I mean,
depends on who's the attorney.
I think you're right. I mean, you're already established licensing facilities right there at the line. Just like on the basis of what's in our land use code at the time, they're gonna be licensed. So, you know, the longer we wait and we don't have something in there, people could potentially go.
But it's just something to consider that we gotta look at. I mean, because it's gonna be a conflict sooner or later.
And also, just so you know, part of the other thing that we have as a benefit for the county that other counties didn't have is we allow for rezoning. So no matter what, the world's still your oyster. We have a process for people to rezone their property.
That's true.
So fact of the matter is, when you talk about targeting infeasibility or reasonability, you can't take out the fact that we have a rezoning process, which pretty much makes the world your oyster, if it can meet the parameters. So hypothetically speaking, and restrictive, unreasonable restriction concerns, that really does have a pretty big lever.
Okay.
To John's point, though, you don't want to have spot zoning of rural industrial commercial, but rural.
Well, why don't we,
industrial commercial is
if we're gonna
spot
do
zoning.
this, we have no choice to do this, why don't we try to protect this business from running into all the potential pitfalls down the road?
I think that's what we need to do.
Why don't we get our zoning set up so that we're going to allow it here and here and here and make it so it's. Because Delta County is a very open county for a lot of interpretation.
I think that's my major concern is just maintaining consistency, you know, with the major rewrite of the land use code. What we heard is a lot of people want things to be less restrictive, and I think we are not being authentic to that, based on like a very specific business. But is there anything else that you
There are
want
just
to?
a couple of points, just a reminder that your next meeting in February 12th is your annual meeting, and that's, you know, for election of officers, consideration of any special projects the commission desires to address for the year, and consideration of your regular meeting schedule. So that's just a reminder. We also have a zoning maps work session scheduled for March 26th, 11 a.m. to 12. And it's just we're being asked to look at the zoning maps. And so as a starting point, we've invited, what's his name? Gabe Preston from RPI, who in 2018 led the PC at that time through the process to get to the zoning map that we have today. And so it's just going to be really a presentation about that, to discuss how did we get these zoning maps we have today.
And that's a presentation
It's
to the
Well,
PRC or open to other.
it's going to be open to you. I'm going to send you all an invitation. It just got set up this week.
But middle of the day.
It's the middle of the day. We can record it, you know, we can provide that for you in recording. The last thing I had was, I do have some,
To
light land use code revisions. They're just like edits of words or things that just maybe little clauses that need to be taken out that are problematic and things like that. I would like to provide you those sometime. The next kind of PC meeting in the future that we have some space on, I'd like to give you kind of a printed copy of these. I've broken them out. They're just little places where in the use of the new land use code, we're kind of running into some problems. Like maybe it says not less than 50%. And we needed to say more than 50%. for example, Some of them are more substantial than that, but we don't have an appetite for a major overhaul, but we're just cleaning up some places where we got some issues. So my thinking and approach it for that would be to provide you with like a printed copy, an explanation, have a discussion similar to this, and then follow up with a digital copy, and then try to provide get your suggestions, or your approvals or your denials or your edits to move on to the BOCC so we can make those changes. That's it.
Great. I just wanted to announce that I will not be running for re-election as chair. So if anyone wants to prepare their campaign speeches or propose another candidate, start thinking about that before our next meeting. I've enjoyed being the chair, but I'm also having a baby in March, so I don't want to commit to more responsibility than I.
Congratulations.
What day?
The 13th of March is the last call.
What's
So can I ask a question on that?
Yeah.
If I were to throw my hat in to help you with your position,
Oh, I see.
would you consider co-chair, knowing at times you may not be here, as long as we had a backup? And just throwing that, we have a couple of members that, like, I know it's hard, like, hard to always be here or whatever, and we seem like we have the core people, but I thought if we didn't have somebody that stepped up or threw their hat in the ring, I just would like to propose that,
Thank you.
if that is a possibility as well.
Well, we'll have an election next meeting.
I just have
Also, no presumption that I would be re.
that's true.
Everyone might already have their campaign speeches ready.
That's right.
So. Yeah. I guess I should probably officially end this meeting if there's nothing else.
One question, how likely do you feel like it would be that February 12th that we could have something, to take to the board?
I think if
I'm
you
feeling
could,
positive if we can nail down
yeah,
table 2B, if we can,
Yep.
if we can think through those, and maybe everyone just kind of spend a little bit of time thinking about
Mhm.
those issues that came up and what
Mhm.
makes sense, and if we can reach some sort of consensus or vote around where we're at it on the table, it seems like everything else we were in pretty good agreement with the rest of it, so,
I feel like we're pretty close.
yeah.
Table 2B has been the death of us, so.
Somebody's died now.
Also, it's why we lived. Yeah. For sure.
What you meant.
okay, so next meeting is the 12th.
Mhm.
Have that in the calendar.
Right,
Great. Thank you, everybody.
yeah,
Thank you.
and thanks for
Thanks
tackling
for all
the
your
first
input.
round, and I think it gave us a good place to jump off from, so.
Todd, you're gonna send us the email, is that what you're, the graduate? So, Thank you.
Mhm.